All right. Hey there. This is Bram Kanstein, and you're listening to Bitcoin for Millennials. With my guests on this podcast, I go on a journey to discover how our current financial system works, why it's flawed, and why Bitcoin is the most relevant technological discovery you should understand and adopt. In this episode, I'm joined by Maya Parbhoe. She's a serial entrepreneur who leads Daedalus Labs, a Bitcoin only development firm committed to solving real world issues. One of their upcoming products is called Resin, a revolutionary service that redefines home buying by letting you use Bitcoin as a security deposit for your purchase without depending on traditional banks. But perhaps most exciting is Maya's upcoming presidential run in 2025, which underscores her dedication to shaping the future of her country, Suriname. So, will she become the next Bitcoin president? Let's find out. But let's manifest it, right? We say yes.
Yes.
You're going to be
Yes.
the next Bitcoin president. All right.
Exactly.
I love it. So, yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. But first, I wanted to start, and I made a little joke before, but it's not polite to ask your age, right? So I Googled you and saw you're a millennial. And I wanted to ask you, like, how you experience talking about Bitcoin with, other millennials. But maybe more specifically, like, in Suriname, there's a different economic situation than in Western Europe or America, and yeah, I'm interested to hear if people are thinking about money or if they're researching it. So yeah, that's what I wanted to start with.
Well, the community is actually it's been growing. When we started out, we had meetups with only 3 people. Now there are over 100. So the community is growing. It's still fairly small, I feel. Like when I talk to people my age, there's a very small amount of people that actually are aware of Bitcoin and or know exactly what it is and how it works. A lot of people still are in the Web3 crypto belief system, where they think that the news and media that has come out since all this Web3 hype started, that is actually what the technology is and what it's been built for or developed for, right? So we're still educating. I've gone on several platforms here on the media, news, and several podcasts locally. I'll also be speaking at a couple of local conferences to, increase awareness and educate. But it's still fairly simple. People are earning on average 150 US to 175 US a month here. They're all in survival mode, especially millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. Um, they're tired. They're in survival mode. They're working 2 to 3 jobs to survive. They don't really have the time to take a deep dive into, what Bitcoin is exactly and what it exactly means and what distinguishes Bitcoin from all other, Web3 fluff out there. Most of it
Yeah.
is just VC vaporware or a scam. I think everything that is not Bitcoin is a scam. Ethereum should be classified as security. There's no reason why it hasn't been yet, aside from just the regulators not understanding the technology well enough. But Gary Gensler gave a presentation at MIT, so I think he understands very well that it is a security, and once it's classified as one, the compliance costs just for every transaction will be way too high for it to be even a sustainable blockchain. Although it's not even that at the time, right? So people don't really see that the difference yet, but I think with time they will. But I try to focus more on for our campaign, the development plan that we have for Suriname, we focus on education. And a part of that education is educating people, keeping in mind technological advancements that are happening right now in AI and quantum computing, the rapid technological advancement that we're going to have in the next 3 to 5 years. If we want to have a strategy for future generations and for the development of this country, then we need to have a strategy that includes where technology is heading. So we have a small population, it's only 600,000 people. So the percentage of children going to school is also very small. So we can actually teach them and prepare them for, a new world. the world is going to change rapidly in the next 5 years. By 2030, they'll be living in a completely different world than what it is now. So we're going to focus more on skills and creativity. Something you can see happen organically within the Nostr community, right? A focus on more decentralized protocol, focused on more freedom. And, we have a very traditional people, very culturally traditional. It's not like Europe or the US, where everything culturally it seems like it's losing its foundation or its connection with its roots, right? We're very tied to our roots, and I think that's something we need to preserve. So preservation of our culture, incorporating new technologies into our educational strategy. We have a primary focus on diversifying away from or diversifying the economy, not just away, but diversifying the economy with a future focus that is, spans decades, not just a couple of years. And then we want to diversify into technology, and then thereby is a part of it, of course, education, but also into the development of technology. And to facilitate that and stimulate that, as a Bitcoiner, I believe firmly that Bitcoin is the only blockchain, should be the only blockchain. And while we also incorporate it into our economic strategy, development strategy, we have Bitcoin at its core, the development of Bitcoin technology for our people, so they get educated, upskilled, and we diversify into energy, also keeping Bitcoin mining at its core, as a part of the strategy. So, for example, we have a hydro dam that currently can generate about 180 megawatts of electricity. There's another project that has been stalled for about a decade that is currently they're trying to develop it for bauxite mining. So we've proposed to them to use it for Bitcoin mining instead, because then you don't have the environmental impact of bauxite mining on that area. We don't have to mine half of a mountain and destroy our forest, to be able to make that dam feasible. We can now just incorporate Bitcoin mining into it. Much smaller footprint. We keep our forest, we keep our mountain, and we can generate enough electricity to power homes and a combination of Bitcoin mining. And we can create a source of income for people aside from the natural resources that we already have. We have massive amounts of offshore oil finds. So the oil sector in Suriname and offshore will develop over the next 5 to 10 years at a rapid pace and scale. It's one of the largest oil deposits in the world. So it will be will be at the same level as, for example, Qatar. So we need to be mindful of how are we going to use this capital that's going to be flowing into the country starting 2028, and how are we going to prepare our people for that transition, and how are we transitioning away from income from fossil fuels and natural resources such as gold, and diversifying into something that can withstand the test of time and create a strong foundation for our future youth. So we have a very strong Bitcoin strategy, a very strong strategy on how to properly allocate resources towards the people. And in that strategy, we incorporate not just having Bitcoin as legal tender or unit of account, that people earn their salaries in Bitcoin. So every other currency in the world will be losing its value in relation to what we earn our time, the trading of our time. Imports, products at the stores priced in Satoshi, the purchasing price of those products will keep decreasing over time instead of increasing. So we can show people in Suriname what the value of Bitcoin is firsthand by living on a Bitcoin standard. It's a small population. It's perfect for adoption. We have a huge gap in financial infrastructure development. We have local, ATM debit cards that don't have MasterCard or Visa on them, so you can't use them anywhere else in the world. And you can only use them for SRD. And even the percentage of the population that uses that is very small. But we have more than 85% mobile penetration. So everybody does have a mobile phone. We can teach people how Bitcoin betters their lives by using it, right? And the moment they earn it as a salary, then they are living on that standard. Just think about internet, right? Compare it to internet. Why are we trying to teach everyone how the economics of it work, how mining works, how all of the complexities that we're trying to teach to people that they don't even understand of the internet right now, right? And that
Yeah.
has been around for much longer than Bitcoin has. So people go online, they use Google Chrome, they know how to use Google, they know how to use Google on their phones, they use applications, but they have no idea that internet works because there's, satellites in the air and cables in the ocean that connect what is our current internet. So people
Yeah.
don't even understand how that works. So I want to show them how it betters their lives. And we're taking a similar approach at Daedalus, with real estate. I have I've had an obsession with capital markets and capital market structures and financial structures. And I've used that skill and vast amount of knowledge to think of what a world would be like if we weren't slaves to debt, right? What would a world be if we didn't have the system that we have now, but we have a system that's just on Bitcoin? And then I see opportunity, and I see opportunity for my country, especially because of the lack of infrastructure that we already have here. We don't have a capital market, so you can't just issue shares and expect investors to jump in. You can't just start a startup and expect to get seed capital or an angel investor. We don't have that infrastructure whatsoever. Nobody's going to invest into you here. You're solely dependent on the bank. And to be able to get a mortgage, the average person that graduates high school here or graduates college or university here cannot buy a house. They can't earn fast enough to get the deposit that they need to get a mortgage, or they don't earn enough to even pay off the 18 to 19% interest that they have to pay on a mortgage, right? So they're completely locked up in a more rigid system than you have in these Western economies where you have the legacy system that is already pretty modernized. We can't use PayPal here. We can't use Cash App and things like that. We don't have payment processors. So you can't just integrate something into your website and do online payments. We don't have that. So Bitcoin is the immediate solution. We can leapfrog from having no technology to using the best technology that is out there. And I am a proponent of open source software. I mean, as Bitcoiners, we all should be, right? We shouldn't be fighting over IP. We shouldn't be fighting or competing with each other over who can build the best wallet and who can get the most customers out of a very small market. We should be focusing on the broader market and collaborating and working together towards building solutions that are user friendly for the masses, right? So I see the next couple of years in Suriname as a proof of concept for the rest of the world on how living on a Bitcoin standard in a country actually works for the entire country, and building a future for Suriname that is built on decentralized, transparent government, privatizing as much as we can. So privatizing education, privatizing healthcare, but in a manner that it benefits the whole. So society, our whole population as a whole, instead of just a small few. So applying the best properties that we've learned and know and love about Bitcoin, why we've been in love with it since its creation, applying that to how we build a future for our society. This is the same conversations that I'm having with other political party leaders as well, because we're just trying to create one united front instead of thinking, party politics, red wing, left wing, right wing, high wing, whatever wing. Just thinking about, okay, what is the strategy on developing Suriname, given that there's a risk of a new world war, given that there's advancement in technology, given that there's a common focus on, being like Elon Musk, interplanetary species, right? Focusing on 2030, 2050, where we're heading, and aligning that vision and thinking about our continent as well. Because I think Latin America has a significant amount of opportunity in relations to countries where innovation has already reached its peak, right? You had the US in until the dot-com bubble, then you had GSM and mobile phones in China, India tech adoption, and the advancement of tech skills among their people. And now you have what is ripe for disruption, Latin America and Africa, that are going to be the leaders in innovation and technology. And I think we as a continent need to focus more on each other, because like Europe is, you have the entire western of Europe is, you can just drive freely from one country to the other. There's trade happening between countries. There's enough transportation. The logistics is sound, right? You can fly very cheaply from one country to another. That isn't the case in Latin America. We're like little islands, separated, still trading with our colonizers or trading with the US, but we haven't focused on a strategy for each other. And we don't have a voice on this global stage as much as, other smaller countries or smaller GDPs even have. As a continent, we have over 600 million people. We have a vast amount of land and resources and natural resources. We should be focusing on a strategy on how to develop the continent. Like in the US, you had the railway system, right? Why isn't there a hyperloop in between countries so you can be, within a couple of hours, or just a fast railway system so you can be in one part of the continent today and have dinner in another part of the continent at night, right? As easy as it is for you in Europe. That will stimulate trade, that will stimulate growth. And in Suriname, we're focusing on being a breeding ground for open source technology. I was never a fan of, Facebook coming in, Instagram coming in, being the de facto platform for social media in our country. Every company is paying on average, at least at the bare minimum, $10 to $50 a month to Facebook to advertise. And if you don't have a Google, if you don't have a Google account, if you don't have a Google presence, if you don't have a Facebook and Instagram presence, you're invisible, right? Then you're only reliant to word of mouth. I don't agree with money flowing since the 1990s, all back to the US and only benefiting that economy. What about our people? What about our media? What about, the freedom for it to be local? So that's why I love Nostr. And I'm definitely a proponent of, supporting the development of open source and open source technology and open source and open protocols. So being able to build an environment for that, an innovation free zone, and building a robust legal framework that actually enables that, I think that can be a real game changer for, everybody in this space, from developers all the way to just companies trying to build protocols that we need to build for future reference, right? If we privatize education, healthcare, that means we're going to need to develop systems for that to be able to function using just Bitcoin. Same goes for infrastructure. I've had an infrastructure company now for the last almost decade, and we build roads, dams, dikes, ports, primarily for the gold companies, or for the oil companies, or for public works. So I've been, and from a financial perspective as a CFO, in that position, seeing how the entire system works. And I see no reason why we can't privatize infrastructure, for example, and completely automate it and make it more transparent, right? If everything is on Bitcoin, even government spending is on Bitcoin, then everything can be transparent and traced. then there's
Yeah.
no room for corruption anymore. Then we just have a plan. This is how we develop the country. This is how much is coming into our sovereign wealth fund from oil. This is how much is coming in from carbon credits because we're 93% forested. This is what's coming in. I actually want to abolish taxes. So basically what's coming in from resources, and that goes into a sovereign wealth fund transparently. And then it goes back into development of the country and development of new technology. Right. And then
I Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I just want to say I love that I asked you one question and you've had an 18-minute monologue. I love it. We need to clip it, and this is your campaign video, I think, or at
Oh my
least
God.
part of it. No, but I love how you talk. I feel like I should move to Suriname, right? Like it's
You should.
yeah. I want to ask some questions about what you said, because one thing I really want to talk about the transparency part. That's one of the
Mhm.
things I wrote down up front, but. Um, when you talk about this, I found it interesting. I talked to Samson Mo, who I think you know. I think you introduced him to, for his trip. And I asked him, like, how do you orange pill leaders of countries, right? And then he said, like, something like, I don't talk about Bitcoin. I just talk about how can you monetize the energy that's, you know, given to you by chance, with the natural resources that are in your country. And I mean, from what you're sharing and from what I know from Suriname, I think there's abundant energy everywhere, right? But also, and I probably have a flawed view of Suriname living in the colonist country, but all these opportunities are there, right? And I think like how you lay it out. Also, I love what you said about, and maybe you see this the same, but I think the biggest opportunity is actually that there's only 600,000 people, right? Like it's a smaller group to convince about, what you should do. I don't know exactly how much El Salvador is, but that's over 10 million, I think, if I'm correct, or like 8, 9, 10-ish or something, right? I see you not, but I don't know, like a few million. We can Google it quickly, but when you said 600K, I was like, that's pretty crazy, right? That's not a lot of people. It's not a lot of people to convince, maybe not necessarily about, like you said, what Bitcoin is, but how Sailor says, it's the hope or the dream, or like, no, not the dream, but like the point on the horizon, like this is where we can go, right? And I think you
Yeah.
laid that out perfectly, like all these elements that work together. So I also wanted to ask you, what would you see as the biggest obstacle? Is that again, from what I see from a distance, like political instability, all these different parties, still not in some way letting go of the past, right? To one degree, probably a good thing. On the other side, maybe that holds you back. Like, what are obstacles that you see?
Well, 40% of voters are under 35. But I've also been in touch with most political party leaders over the last couple of weeks, actually, and everybody kind of believes that there needs to be change, and there needs to be room for a younger generation, and they need a leader with vision. So I've heard that a lot recently during discussions, and we're actually trying to get everybody on board to build that vision, right? No longer,
Mm,
I think I said this, no longer a left wing, right wing,
mm,
or type of direction or party thinking, but just a country thinking, right? Thinking like,
yeah,
okay, this is Suriname now. This is where we want to go. How are we going to get there? And not just having a vision, but also a plan on how to execute it. Suriname is right now in an MIT REAP program, which is a program developed by MIT. They took the Silicon Valley model, built a framework, and executed that in 70 countries in the world. So you have innovation hubs, like for example, SG Innovate that came out in Singapore, London. So they developed these innovation hubs. Right now, I am the champion for our program in Suriname, where I'm focusing on developing that, that development plan and building that ecosystem, building that infrastructure. And it's not going to be built with, some altcoin, alternative blockchain, or whatever they want to call it these days. It's going to be built using Bitcoin technology. So we have projects in the bioeconomy. We have projects on just, federations popping up here. We just had our first Fedi Federation launch. We have projects in energy transition that are, incorporated in Bitcoin mining. So we're incorporating it into our whole development strategy for the country and bridging that kind of like old archaic system with, the new one, or trying to transition them completely to a new one.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I also loved what you said about, the cheaper products. I think that's a very good argument, to use, especially for, of course, the people that eventually have to vote for you. But I think it's so logical to do. Yesterday I had a recording for the podcast, and we were talking about, it's so strange that, also here, you and I figured this out. We figured this Bitcoin thing out, right? But for, on Twitter and stuff, people talk a lot about, rich people need to figure it out. They have stuff to lose. But like, as a country, you even have like a bigger incentive to figure this out. And I think the example that you gave about the cheaper products is like one of them, right? Like, if you adopt a Bitcoin standard and everything in your economy is based on Bitcoin, then all the prices of your import will fall to the prices of the money that you use in your country as your legal tender. Like, it makes so much sense, right? It's the same kind of like game theory that you see in, different layers in Bitcoin, right? It's this, like, once you adopt it and you see the benefit, you don't want to throw it away anymore. Like, your incentives are aligned. Everyone's incentives are aligned, right? And then also in the country, between people, when they trade and do business with each other, like, they are all aligned. Like, Bitcoin aligns everyone. And I love that you said about that. But like, are there any other things, other roles that Bitcoin can play in addressing like the inequality, like, in the country, but also with regards to, what you said about, its place in the world, the opportunity with,
Yeah.
natural resources?
So for example, natural resources right now are either being used as collateral for debt, or it's flowing directly into into government salaries. Our working population is about 140,000, 68,000 work for government. So every year, about 9 to 10,000
Wow.
get added. Yes. So not every year. I'm sorry. Every election. So
But you're in
our
that stage, basically, right?
yes, well, you don't want to
Right?
increase the size of government because there's not
No,
enough
that's what
work.
I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
No,
we
but I
need to
mean, like,
decrease.
this is where you are. If we talk about the state of Suriname,
Exactly. That's
you're in that
exactly where we
state.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to get away from that and to use resources more efficiently, we can channel those resources directly to the people. And for example, things that are now state-owned, Grasalco is a state-owned company, Suriname Airways is a state-owned company, our water company, our electricity company, everything is state-owned, and everything runs inefficiently, very much subsidized by government, so very much subsidized by the people. It's
Yeah.
our resources, it's our gold, it's our oil, it's our forest, it's our resources, it's for the people, right? And government seems to forget that they work for the people. It is the people that we're serving. And we can be more efficient about how we use our natural resources and the income and royalties that we receive by them. Something that was actually suggested by one of our Minister of Foreign Affairs was share issuance on liquid directly to the people of the state oil refinery, so that they receive direct income, from oil royalties
Yeah.
flowing in.
Yeah. Great.
So that is one of the things we could do. Similarly, with all the other companies, for example, that are at scale in this country. But we can also facilitate that capital market development that is completely illiquid right now. Microcredits, share issuances, stock issuance, or bond issuances for companies, so that resource allocation can be optimized for efficiency and speed and liquidity. And that basically enables more growth of that private sector. So, you have, not everybody can run a large company. Not everybody can be a large scale entrepreneur. So you have small scale and medium and large corps, right? But if resources flow efficiently to all of them equally, and the unit of account for everybody's salary is in Satoshis, then I see no reason why in a free and open market where you don't have government overreach, why it wouldn't optimize for the better of the community as a whole, instead of centralizing towards the top 1%, as what you have now. So I see this as an opportunity to, with transparency, with that common mindset, for we're working towards a common goal. We have a vision. This is how we're going to develop the country, clearly mapped out, right? For example, for urban planning, we want to engage MIT City Lab. They've recently developed a 3D modeling, or recently, it's been over a year, 3D modeling program to kind of see exactly how your city is going to develop and plan for the next couple of decades, and do that in a way that is green, right? We love the solar punk culture, more green, less, just build not just blocks like New York, towers of concrete, but actually incorporate nature into our development strategy. So we also have that as part of how we see urban planning and housing playing out. So we can actually visualize for the people, similar to, I don't want to name Dubai, but similar to what they're doing with trying to attract investors, but they're visualizing basically how your country can be, by a set time. So we have a plan for 2035, how we envision the country. We can visualize it for the people, and they can actually work together towards that common goal. And privatizing healthcare, privatizing education, but putting the frameworks in place so that it doesn't get as commercialized as the US, right? Where the pharmaceutical industry went completely berserk. But fostering an environment where research and development for medicine can be for the betterment of society as a whole, like the whole planet as a whole. We have a very biodiverse forest. We have plants that you don't have anywhere else in the world. We have certain species that you don't have anywhere else in the world. We have certain bacteria that you don't have anywhere else in the world. So there's an opportunity to reframe how commerce and trade is done, and taking the examples from what is wrong in the US, what is wrong in Europe, what is wrong with those systems, and taking examples from what are the best systems, what does work for the entire community, what does work for the people, right? If you look in Switzerland, for example, I throw the trash out. There's an underground system that brings it to one
goes
central
to the train.
Exactly.
To the trains, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's there's no reason why, with the resources we have, we couldn't put things that are good for nature in place and things that are good for our people in place. And if you look at the federal system, for example, and the cantonal system, it is so decentralized. Like, people in a community, like a small town like Davos, for example, 13,000 people, they decide what happens in their little canton. There's no reason why we cannot bring certain utilities, certain resources, and certain infrastructure back, the decision-making process back to the people. So they can decide, we want to build this road or we want to build that bridge, and vote on it for themselves. For me, the dream would be to, we want to focus on housing and housing development in particular. That's what we're building with Daedalus as well. Preferably in 2 years, 5 if necessary, but preferably 2, I would not need to be president of the country anymore. Preferably, I would just be a figurehead running a company, and the country can basically fully automated, transparently run itself.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
it's
And the people can
yeah,
decide for themselves.
Yeah. I think two things that come to mind for me are like, if you, from a foundational perspective, if you align the government with ultimate transparency, right, by adopting Bitcoin, then you also incentivize anyone who's building on top of that, i.e., any company in your country, right? Like what you said, if you do healthcare or education or transport, they are forced to adhere to that foundational baseline, basically, that's set by the government, right? So the government sets the frame for the rules of engagement, basically, and you then force the companies that you let develop things in your country to also like follow these rules. And I think that's like a total 180 as to what is there now, right? In general, in most countries. I think Switzerland is a great example for where it's different. I think also Dubai, in a sense, they have a set, like in Dubai, or is it UAE as a whole, like they have a set of principles, right? Like the 8 principles. Have you ever seen that? Like they have like eight principles that they adhere to, right? That is still, it's nice, but it's still on paper, right? There's no accountability in a sense. But with Bitcoin, you can bring the accountability because you tie in the value, what you use for value exchange, i.e. the money, basically. So yeah, I love that thought. And also what you said, if, for example, the oil reserves, right? That's a gift to the country. If you can automatically give the people 20% of the dividends or the royalties, or whatever you call that, automatically, then you basically give them kind of like a UBI type thing. I don't like the UBI term, but it's more that like they share in the profits of the country, right?
Yeah,
And therefore
they get their resources directly.
Exactly.
Get a share of it.
But translate it into money that they can then spend in the economy again, right? Yeah. And so and we didn't mention this now in this recording, but in our previous recording that failed, we talked about when you learn about Bitcoin and money, I think in Bitcoin world we talk a lot about how it can help countries like Suriname, and help the people. But the people don't have time to learn, right? They don't have time to learn because they are stuck. But if you can create something like a UBI type scheme where people get money for, let's say, basic needs almost, right? Like that could probably be, that $200 or $300 a month to give them, a basic living expenses. Then they can also create time to, well, maybe not to figure out what is money anymore, but to figure out what am I going to contribute to this
society,
country, right?
Yeah.
Like, and what am I going to do? And I think in that model, for lack of a better term, UBI, but in that model, the UBI would work, right? In a fiat country, UBI is still it's a scammy, weird scheme.
It's
like
coming out
no
of
money,
taxes,
no money is
right?
free. Yeah, no money.
Yeah,
it's not free.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not coming from the resources, and because combined with Bitcoin, we can attach the ultimate transparency, right? So everyone can see the flows of the royalties or the dividends from the oil reserves, and then you can just look up the transactions that go to the wallet that takes care of the UBI for the people, for example, right? Like you can actually prove that, I like using the term like you're walking the talk, right? Like in a fiat world, everything is talk, but in a Bitcoin world, you are walking the talk. Like the whole idea is that you show this, you are forced to be transparent, and you cannot fuck with it, basically. You have to show what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what people are also looking for. because then they know, the country that I live in is actually trying to take care of the people that make it up, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's what some people in developed countries take for granted that they have, that is so backwards here. Um, but we can actually just, even with all the corruption we have right now, on a Bitcoin standard, it won't be possible. And
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
can immediately impact and change the people, their lives. The population is small enough, the amount of resources we have is large enough. We can set an example for the rest of the world and, become a society that is future focused instead of constantly living in the past and trying to survive. So
Yeah.
I think inherently it will be transformative for this country and for its people.
Yeah. So how do you see, I think we touched upon this a bit, but like how could Bitcoin then shift like the balance of power from the government to the people? Is that just by the government saying, well, basically what we just said, this is the foundation that we operate on, and therefore, yeah, we are actually transparent. You can ask us to be transparent, and we cannot do anything else than to be transparent. Is that just it? Like, are the
I think
people
we
then
can
back in power, or?
I think we can automate away a lot of government that is now being done manually. And that we can make it more efficient, less bureaucratic, less archaic. And then transition people into more future focused, other industries that are focused on development of this country and the future, and not stuck in that old archaic system. So I want to see less government. I want to see less government involvement. I'd like to see more automation. I'd like to see more efficient systems. There are populations that are larger than ours, being run by less people. If you look at the Netherlands,
Yeah.
right? You have some provinces that have 10 times the amount of people. Okay, maybe less than 10, 5 times the amount of people that are managed by, I think, maybe 1% of the amount of people that we have working for government. So
Yeah.
it can be done. It can be done. I just We just need to implement the strategy of, or actually our plans on how to transition them into new sectors, and
Yeah.
how we generate, or how we more efficiently use resources
Yeah.
directly to transition and diversify away from the system that it is now. But I prefer to see much less government involvement into innovation and development of new innovations. I'd like to see a large hadron collider here at some point, and a launch base. We're 5 degrees from the equator, so the French are launching next door. So those are plans that we'd like to incorporate in our decade-long strategy, or multi-decade-long strategy for this country.
Yeah. So obviously you have a lot of plans now, based on Bitcoin. But when you discovered Bitcoin, can you tell me a bit about like how you got into it, but also like what was really your aha moment? Like when did you see it?
Well, I learned about Bitcoin from a friend in 2012. He told me about it, and then I started researching, and I was like, okay. When I saw the white paper, I was like, holy shit, this is gonna change the world. But it's still early. I wonder if it gets traction, right? That was my immediate reaction. Um, and then I kept an eye on it. Then WikiLeaks happened, and that was my aha moment. That was like, okay, if they can somehow block WikiLeaks from receiving donations, then it's fucked. If they can, and this is the solution, then it's it's unstoppable. That was my aha moment. And when that happened, when China banned it for, I think, the 100th time, um, that is when I realized, like, okay, this thing can withstand, government, like whatever government will try to destroy it. So it's here to stay. And that's when I knew I need to spend the rest of my life on this. I already loved math. I already had a obsession with finance and technology. Um, and I'd gotten an obsession with capital markets and their development and how they functioned after I learned about Bitcoin and after, the 2008 crisis happened. Um, I knew, like, I had already realized that markets move in cycles, and I'd analyzed the real estate market and debt, and global politics. So you kind of knew that something was going to happen in 2008, that it was time. Um, and Bitcoin was to me the answer to that. And it was how we would prevent that from ever happening again. So I was always waiting for that new system to get built. Like, okay, where is this capital market system or this economy where Bitcoin actually is, solves this whole centralization issue with central banks and the big banks. It hasn't
Yeah.
materialized yet, but I feel like this year we're at the start of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I also feel that from and this is not my this is my new thought based on I think the presentation of Saylor this week, where he also said like the 2020 to 2024, like the 2009 to 2020 was a period, 2020 2024 was a period, and from now on, this is like the real start. It's I feel I tweeted this like last week, but I feel like it's like the cat is really out of the bag. Like it is
Yeah.
so it's so unstoppable where we are right now. And this is on another level, but again, the thing about the incentives are aligned. Like I personally not really a fan of the ETFs or Wall Street adoption, although you cannot stop anyone. But I think so. I'm not a fan of the fact that the finance bros figured it out. Basically, that's what
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of, right? But we cannot stop them from adopting it. The other side of that is like I find it incredible that Wall Street adopted something that was randomly released on an internet forum 15 years ago. Like that is the main signal, right? Like that it's a thing. It's not a fad. It's really a thing, and I think it's so interesting still that people who like criticize it are like, yeah, but it's a Ponzi and this and that. Like, do you know how many fucking people researched Bitcoin at any of these ETF issuers, how many
Yeah.
legal and compliance people there are? Like hundreds of people, and tens of people signed off on this, and all these people had to be convinced, all these people that also have their own career tracks and lives and egos and all this, like, and they all check the box because it makes sense, so it makes logical sense, as to
Mhm.
how they presented what Bitcoin is. So they just figured it out. They know what this is. Unfortunately, I have to
Yeah, I
say,
was
but
just about to say.
but it's this is the next part of what Bitcoin is going to be, and why I said this is like their incentives are now aligned with us, which is super funny to say, right?
Yeah, it
They
is.
are
It
not they
is.
are not more powerful. Like that's what Bitcoin is, right? Whether you have zero point 0.1 Bitcoin or 100,000 Bitcoin, the 100,000 Bitcoin person is not more powerful with regards to their influence in this monetary system, right? And so
Exactly.
the fact that they figured it out, it sucks, but we are just as strong as them in that sense, right? So yeah, I see 2024 also as like that's the start of the ETFs. From then on, this is changing because more incentives will be aligned, right? There will be countries, I think, and I wanted to ask you this question, like, who do you think, because I hope you will be it, but I think before you will be it, another country will be it, right? Like, I'm wondering who the first follower of Bukele will be, right? Like, Bukele is the crazy guy that started dancing, but like, who's gonna dance with him? Like, who's the first follower? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, actually. I have no leader in mind who I think would immediately take the plunge,
Hmm.
to be honest. Maybe Argentina. Mm. I'm not sure, really.
My guess is on an Arab country or a Muslim
Really?
country. Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah,
think?
yeah, yeah. It's ultra halal. No, it's very clear. It's ultra halal.
It's ultra
So
halal.
yeah. No, but I mean more like there's no it doesn't conflict with the ideology or the religion. That's more
Mm-hmm.
also what I mean. And I feel that the dumbest trade you can make is sell oil for dollars. Like that's not a smart trade, right? So asking energy money for real energy from the earth makes way more sense. And like for example in Qatar, I don't think it's going to be Qatar, but in Qatar you have that like $1 billion mining project with Marathon. Like they are
Yeah.
very rich, but $1 billion is $1 billion, right? Like you only do that when you understand like what the ROI can be on that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an Arab country. And then number 3 is you. I hope. But let's see. So to go back to like finance, like what do you think is the biggest thing that people don't understand about the financial system? Like, and why should they understand that?
Well, I think they don't understand how rigged it actually is against
Hmm.
them. I think most people, I mean, in our industry, everybody understands it, or most people understand it and how it works. I think the majority still does not. They're still not aware of, fractional reserve banking and how the Fed just prints US dollars. I think that is not out there enough, for the masses to actually fully grasp it. So there are some
Yeah.
documentaries coming out, but even documentaries, it has to be something that goes like a documentary that goes global, because completely overhyped, that it has that aha moment where it clicks for everyone. But I think that that is something that is still not very clear. The fact that the
Yeah.
US just prints money out of thin air and rules the entire global economy with their currency, without it having any solid backing or foundation. I think that is inherently what's wrong with the current system. And the fact that, the US capital market, it, it basically, because of the amount of US dollars that they make or print, they inject it into the financial system, and that ends up into stocks that outperform way past their actual like a foundational value or intrinsic value. So if I feel like there's a big discrepancy in that, and it gives an advantage to that capital market, but it doesn't help the rest of the world at all.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that is still very much underappreciated. Yeah, underappreciated globally. It should be more mainstream or common knowledge that that's actually happening, and how our economies are reliant on that system, right? Because we as Bitcoiner, we say it a lot.
Other countries than United States, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Like we're
Yeah.
very much dependent on IMF and IDB and World Bank, right? We're dependent on their loans for the development of our countries. And I think the world doesn't really understand that it's a rigged system, when there's no reason why we need them with the amount of resources that we have. And why is it solely based on the US dollar and not on a basket of currencies, or Bitcoin being, as it is, increasing in value in relation to any fiat currency? Why wouldn't that be the reserve currency of the world, for example? So I think that hasn't reached the masses yet, or it
Yeah.
hasn't been dumbed down enough, for everybody to completely understand yet, or it needs to reach like COVID level hysteria, where similar to how COVID went in the news globally. Like we have to have that happen with this revelation globally. But yeah.
Yeah. It's funny when you when you said that, I thought, yeah, like the ice bucket challenge, but
Yeah.
But that is then my next thought is immediately like
Sure.
bread and circus thought. So I don't know if it's ever going to be like that, but yeah, but I do think it's slowly but surely. What is, for example, super fun about doing the podcast? I literally I just got a comment by a guy. That's so fun. I love seeing comments, but also thinking like these are real people, right? And I think like Bitcoin is a mind virus, and it goes slowly, but
Mm-hmm.
once you get it, you like want to tell other people, right? So it's
Yeah.
not viral in the ephemeral sense, right? Like this thing, or today this thing went viral, and tomorrow another thing. Like it's a substantial change to your worldview once you understand it, right? So this guy
Mm-hmm.
sent to me, I am a boomer, 72. I came across Bitcoin 3 years ago as I was concerned about my retirement and the diminishing value of my pension. I'm proud to say I'm now 100% Bitcoin maximalist, having spent hundreds of hours learning and educating myself. So cool. Like, this is a real guy, and people are doing this, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is already like the ball is rolling, but I think because we are already there in our minds and for a longer time, right? We want to speed it up, but
Yeah.
it doesn't go like
Low
that.
time, low
I
low
think
time
low time.
preference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So um I want to ask you two more questions. um Next to like the finance, economics, etc., like do you see any like philosophical or like spiritual implications coming from Bitcoin?
Yeah, I do. I think it shifts your own clock, right? Like your own biological clock. It feels like it shifts. And your own perception of reality in the world, like you just said, it makes you rethink your priorities and your values, I think, as well. Right? I was very much in I was so obsessed with fixing this country, developing the capital market, um, building that new system, using liquid and Bitcoin, or using Taproot, figuring it out. I was so obsessed with it that I was like in like a rat in a little in a little wheel running.
Yeah.
And I don't know, somewhere last year it clicked for me that you just focus on things that matter the most, like family, friendships, your social life, your health, what you eat, what you digest, socially, and from internet, from media, and just focus on living. I think Bitcoin brings you back to that. I think on average, in my life, I've lost my father, I've lost family members, and then when someone dies, you realize what life is worth. And I think Bitcoin has the same effect, right? It teaches
Yes.
you what life is worth again, and what's valuable, um, and how valuable things like love and health and family are. So I think that is something that is valuable that Bitcoin teaches, that comes with, living on a Bitcoin standard. And you learn to be less, yeah, I don't like with our team, for example, less stringent on how you work, when you work. You give more priority to family, to friends, to other things. And, you work because you're passionate about something and you dedicate your time to it. But it is no longer a 9 to 5, sitting behind your PC for a set amount of hours because you need to do something now because you have some kind of deliverable. There's more like we're collaboratively working. Like my entire Daedalus team, right? We're node runners, we're toxic maximalists. We work together towards a common goal. And I laid out this vision for the guys. I told them how I see this country in the future, how I see the world in the future. And like Ralph even came back and he's like, but Maya, that sounds like a utopia. And I'm like, what are you expecting the future to be? Dystopia? Right?
Yeah.
So
But this is
yeah,
also the
exactly.
shift. The no, but the positive outlook, right?
Yeah,
on the
yeah, exactly.
future.
A positive
Yeah.
outlook on the future. So now we're working together on something we're all passionate about. We're working on Bitcoin technology and increasing adoption, building this new system. So I think that it gives you freedom more than
Yeah.
anything, right? Freedom, the
Yeah.
freedom to do what you're good at and bring value to everyone in the ecosystem. Because what I create, an idea is not mine. Similar to Bitcoin is not just mine, it's everyone's. Bitcoin is for everyone. And I think similarly, everything that we develop, every like milestone that we achieve gives back to the entire community. And that is like our values are also represented in how we build this, and how we build Resin, like that it works for the entire community. And that is, it takes up the best properties of Bitcoin. We build it in a way that it is a living example of what we think the world should be based off of what we've learned from Bitcoin and being Bitcoiners for this long. How we ideally see real estate be developed, and how we think that it's lost its connection to its intrinsic or its utility value, and that it needs to go back to that utility value. Everybody needs a roof over their heads, right? But we
Yeah.
shouldn't be paying an arm and a leg for it. Our grandfathers, great grandfathers, they could purchase or build their own house with a couple of months of income or a couple of years of income, right, over these generations. And now you're paying off your mortgage until you turn 60. So
Yeah.
things have changed for the worse, and we want to build a future for our kids, for future generations that they can be proud of, and where they're not spending their entire life a debt slave to be able to provide a roof over their heads, and be able to eat on a daily basis. So we want to build towards that future, and I feel like we're collaboratively doing that, and hopefully we can be an example for other companies to be more open on collaboration, and not just focusing on building solutions that are good for Bitcoiners, but building solutions that are good for society as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about when you lose someone and then you see how precious life is, right? Like what the finiteness of your time is. This is
Mm-hmm.
really like a team I've been on, because if you, and I think you would agree, right? I'll also, again, Sailor mentions this in the video, right? Like in that presentation, like the only thing you can compare Bitcoin to is time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
let's say, like, just as to how finitely scarce it is, there's nothing else. But time is hard to grasp, right? And so when someone dies, you realize that you have a finite time, right? Um it's like a
A
life
wake-up
moment
call.
where you realize that, right? But when you woke up this morning, you didn't think about, oh, I don't know how much time I have left, so I have to make something of the day, right? Like, you're not that conscious. But I feel that, if you go along with the analogy of Bitcoin, is time, that if Bitcoin is the reward for you spending your time, right, with your job or a venture, then it makes time very tangible, because um, you will be forced to think about, what do I want to do with my time if Bitcoin is the reward, right? And then you will think like, oh, am I actually spending my time on the thing that I enjoy doing, right? Or that contributes to me building a family, or, whatever the life is
Mm-hmm.
that you want. So yeah, I'm exploring these thoughts, but now that you said that, like, for me, it makes it like tangible. It makes the time tangible, so it gives you an incentive to actually really think about, like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to spend
Yeah.
my time on, more
Yeah.
than the random life moments that you sometimes have where you are forced to think about it, right? This is more
Yeah. Yeah.
voluntarily, like, it's inviting you.
I think we all had it. Like on my team, we all had last year that we were really going through, what do we want to spend the rest of our lives on? What do we want to spend the next 30 years on building? What what do we want to contribute to humanity? And we I think reorganized all of our lives separately. We didn't even know that each of us was doing that the year prior, starting the year prior. But we all organized our lives in a way where we can build this, common vision that we have, where we can contribute back to the community, where we can collaborate with the community, and where we can work with other Bitcoiners to build this vision that we have for the world. And it was for all of us, the shift. And also in my personal life, having more of a shift towards, spending more time on love, something as simple as how you prioritize your relationship. That is also something that I can see in my team, the traditional family values, being more adherent, being more cohesive than prior.
Yeah.
And I can immediately see it in my team as well. Everybody's happy, everybody's creative, everybody's productive. We're working towards a common goal. Nobody feels like we're working even. It feels more like, we're purpose driven. We're working towards this common future that we have, and everything that we do kind of aligns. And I remember, I think I was speaking to about this with Obi, I think a week ago, and he said, this is the culmination of almost a decade or more of work that is just coming into play right now. Like, you've been working on this for 10 years, longer than 10 years. Like, this is what you've been working on, culminating and coming into life finally. So
Yeah.
it also feels like that. It feels like things are just falling into place, right? Just like how Bitcoin just finds its way and is unstoppable. Life just kind of found its way, and it's just kind of falling into place right now. It's actually, if you think about it, it's super exciting, but it's also like one of the most, I think, rarest experiences that you can have as a human being. Like, knowing that you're an early adopter in something, that you're at the forefront of technology and innovation, and that you're at the forefront of change, right? Imagine being one of the first people to build an internet company, or one of the first people to build mobile phones, something that would so fundamentally change society. That is where we are at right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to be changing the way that not just people live, but how people interact with each other and how countries interact with each other. We're going to be shaping how an economy develops. And we have like the perfect pilot environment here at Suriname. And I hope that, collaboration with other Bitcoin jurisdictions, that it spreads like wildfire over the next couple of decades, and that eventually the entire world is orange, as our goal is with 21.world.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I'm not, I feel it. I'm not yet in a position to contribute to it in that way, but I 100% agree with what you're saying. But also the place in time that we are so fortunate to live in is so mind-boggling. Like you said, it's so huge that it's really hard to understand that we are so lucky to be alive right now, right? Like, it
Yeah.
feels like these things that are so huge that could change the world are all in the past, and so that feels very distant.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
we
come
are
on,
living in it.
we're the generate. Sorry to interrupt, but we're the generation that experienced life without computers, without mobile phones, and
Yeah.
then we grew up with it. So we're right in the middle between what my little nieces and cousins, they grew up with technology. So them, life is completely different than we have. We've experienced both. So I think we're going to be pivotal to where society goes, and it's our generation right now that is taking over. on a global stage. Like it's more younger generation. We're taking over companies. We're going into leadership positions, whether it be in the private sector, public sector, or NGOs or whatever organization you belong to. It is millennials right now that are going to be, leading the world and hopefully leading change for the better. So I hope that, as Bitcoiners, we are infecting everyone with, or orange pilling everyone or purple pilling everyone with Nostr, because Nostr does have that culture that is less about fighting and infighting. It's more about actually just building value, creating value, and exchanging value with each other, and building on an open source protocol where you just like kind of collaborate with each other and develop in an open system, in an open way, in a completely open source way. Actually, you can just build it collaboratively with the entire ecosystem. And you can build a client that immediately is accessible to anyone with an MPub. So I think our generation is gonna be the one that changes the world from what it was to what it will be, right? Like what it was, we're still seeing remnants of what it was with what's happening in Russia, or what's happening in Eastern Europe, and what's happening in the US right now. It's almost like watching the Roman Empire crumble in the US. We are going to be that generation that shifts now towards, a future that we're going to build leading into 2030, 2035. So yeah, the name of your show is really good.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. Like that's this, you nailed it. This is why. 100%. Yeah.
No.
I see the same, but not everyone understands Bitcoin, because we also come from this type of previous world, right? Like the non-digital world, and especially, and that's why I also love talking with you, because you also know, the country that I live in, right? Like I think that especially in Western countries, the entire topic of what is money and all these things is just also not debated or even questioned, because it really just works, right? Like where in Suriname you have other types of problems with money, here there are zero problems with money, at least on the surface, right? So no one is really questioning it, but eventually that is a huge problem. And yeah, I agree, like we are the biggest demographic moving into power, etc., inheriting the big part of the money, right? So we need to fix the money.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to get to orange pilling and purple pilling.
100%. Well, that's, I think, what we try to do also, with this episode. I want to ask you the last question and then we wrap up. But I ask everyone the same question, and that is, what is a core belief that you will never let go?
A core belief that I will never let go. Well, I want to say integrity, but integrity is it's more of a value. A belief would be, I believe in fate. Like I have Urdu. I'm not Arabic, but I have old Arabic kismet written tattooed on my wrist. And kismet means call it fate, call it serendipity, call it the universe has a plan for us, but everything happens in a specific manner, a specific time. I do believe that there is something that is guiding us, or something that I like math, right? So it is everywhere. Like geometry, math is everywhere. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason. I do believe that there's karma, and I do believe that in the end, good always wins, and that everything is falling into place and everything is playing out exactly as it is supposed to. So even though I like to fight it a lot sometimes, because I'm very OCD and stubborn and try to plan over analyze everything, I really do believe that the world is, evolving as it should, and that that eventually good will win over evil. Fate. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great ending to this episode. Well, I loved it. Thank you so much. I think what you're doing is super admirable, and it sounds hard but doable. So I'm super excited to see where you take it. I will link to your social profiles and Daedalus Labs, but I'd love to talk again. When you're actually running.
Yeah.
I think you have a big, how do you say, advantage when it comes to your reach. The next Bitcoin president is a really nice slogan. So I think you will get a lot of support online also, sharing your message, and hopefully this is the start. So yeah, thanks for your time, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, it would be amazing if you could rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. It will help us educate more millennials on the importance of Bitcoin. You can follow and connect with me on Twitter. I'm Bramk, that's at BRAMK. And if you are or know someone who has an interesting perspective on Bitcoin that's worth sharing, hit me up. I read and reply to every single message. I appreciate your support and hope you'll be here for the next episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.